Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Great Leadership. My guest today, Jim Keys. And let me just tell you a little bit about Jim, then we'll talk about some of the topics that we're going to explore today. So Jim is the former CEO of 7-Eleven, where he was there from 2000 to 2005. He was responsible for a 10-fold increase in shareholder value. He was also the CEO of Blockbuster from 2007 to 2011. I actually used to work for Blockbuster many moons ago.
Do you still have your car?
The Blockbuster closed down. It was in Woodland Hills. I can't remember. I think it became a Kinko's now, actually. But I had good fond memories working there. And then after Blockbuster, Jim was the CEO of Wild Oats, which is a producer of natural and organic foods. It was acquired by Whole Foods. Jim was also the CEO of Fresh and Easy from 2013 to 2015. And he has a brand new book coming out, Education is Freedom. The Future is in Your Hands. I think actually from all the podcast guests that I've interviewed, you've been the CEO of more companies than anyone else. You got like 4 or 5 companies in there. And so today we want to explore a few things, or at least I want to get to a couple topics here. Number one, why you wrote the book. I want to talk about some of the challenges that you went through, some of the adversity. There are a lot of rumors and myths around what happened with Blockbuster, and everybody says, Blockbuster went down because they couldn't adapt as a result of technology. But there's actually a real reason for why Blockbuster ended up going through so much trouble. We'll talk about that. I also want to touch on some leadership advice that you've been given, the importance of curiosity, pain in leadership. And then towards the very end of the show for the Leaders Toolkit, we'll be going over these 9 C-suite learnings, which I think are incredibly valuable and important. So with that introduction, Jim, thank you for joining me today.
Happy to be with you.
Well, first question for you is why write this book?
It's been a passion project for many years, starting really not long after I took my first job, and I, actually helped share the story. It's the story of the title, Education is Freedom. I was walking across campus, Columbia University, going back to teach a class in retail. After, I think I was CEO of 7-Eleven at the time, briefcase in hand, I've got a suit on, I look all spiffy and everything. And, there's a student walking toward me, and he had jeans, a t-shirt, and an armful of books. He looked like I did when I was there, right? African-American kid, and he's like, looked tired, going through the usual second year business school stuff. And his t-shirt stopped me in my tracks. I was literally walking across campus a little late to go teach this class. I look at this kid, smile. I see his t-shirt. It says, Education is Freedom. And literally it stopped me. And I was like, whoa, hey, dude. I shook his hand. I said, you have no idea. That's me. I had no business being here because I was one of those kids, too big a family, too many kids, no money, didn't think I'd ever get to go to college. Nobody in the family did. And here I was walking across campus to go teach a class at Columbia University. And it was all about, it sort of sunk in at that moment. It was all about education. And it wasn't about making money, because I had money at that point. I wasn't by any means rich, but I had a tremendous amount of freedom, more freedom than I ever thought I would ever have, to jump in a plane, fly anywhere in the world, do business, in Asia and Europe and all over the place. And it was just, that enlightening moment. So at that point, I kind of filed that away and said, someday I'm going to tell this story. And I finally got around to it. Education is Freedom. The book is now the story of how anyone can do it. And it's a bit of a roadmap to show you how.
Who is ultimately responsible for the education and for the success? I feel like in today's world, there's a little bit of a, I don't know, we talk about the accountability on behalf of organizations, which certainly there is, right, to offer learning and training and education and development, but we don't spend enough time talking about the accountability that the individual needs to have for themselves. So
Yeah.
what, if you were to kind of split up who's responsible for your education, who's responsible for your success, how would you break it up? What percentage goes to the company? What percentage goes to the individual to actually take advantage of those things and take action?
The subtitle of the book, Education is Freedom, the subtitle is The Future is in Your Hands. And I mean that individually, in that there's really no excuse because, we all have excuses. I had a million excuses. But at the end of the day, it's how much you individually take responsibility for your own life and how much you're willing to work and how much you're willing to learn that makes all the difference in the world. But it's also the collective view in the sense that, as corporations, I think we have, as leaders of corporations, a responsibility, but to grow employees, to help public school systems and education systems. Because if you think about what is the demand for an educated workforce, it's all
Yeah.
companies. So it should be a company, incentive to go out and help others, advance their education so they have a future educated workforce.
It's interesting that you mentioned it depends on how hard you work, because to me, it feels like a lot of people, and I'm probably going to anger some people by saying this, but it feels like a lot of people don't want to work as hard as they used to. It feels like today to tell people to work hard is almost a bad word. You see companies or employees who are saying they want to work 32 hours a week instead of 40, that everybody wants to shorten the work week. You see stories. There was actually a trending story online. It was on TikTok, actually. It was a Gen Z, this young woman put up a video, and she was complaining and she's crying in this video. And she's saying that, I have to wake up. I have to leave the house at 7:30. I don't get home until 6 o'clock each day. And it's just too much and I can't handle it. I saw another video that somebody put up online where this lady's a recent graduate and she's saying she's interviewing for jobs. And she's like, I want to make $150 to $2,000 a year, my first job. And I don't know, I see these videos and I see some of the discussions that are taking place. And I look at my dad, who used to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and wouldn't come home until 7:30. I used to wake up at 6 or 6:30 and not come home until 6. I used to sit in an hour and a half traffic. Do you think some of our work ethic is dying off a little bit and we're not willing to put in the time and the energy, the resources, the sacrifices? I feel like some of that's missing.
Every generation likes to look back and bash the other generation and say, "Oh, they didn't work as hard as me." And I was growing up. It's like, well, I had to walk 20 miles through the snow to go to school. What's the matter with you, kid? Why are you whining about having to take a school bus? So, I mean, every generation looks back and says, they didn't work as hard as me. Now, maybe we weren't the greatest generation or aren't the greatest generation because those guys were a whole different breed, having to go to war, et cetera, et cetera. But, I'll give you examples. I went to work in my dad's factory. Talk about hardworking people, right? I mean, these are laborers. They're in a factory making abrasive blocks, cutting big blocks down a little. I mean, this is hard work. And my dad used to say, I don't ever want to have to see you do this. I went to work there, and they had this thing called piecework, where the more you work, the harder you work, more money you make. And I'm like trying to pay for school, so I'm going, oh, I got this, and I'm an athlete. I'm playing football and baseball, and so I'm in pretty good shape. And I'm on this machine, man. I'm cutting more blocks than anybody's ever seen, and pretty soon I get the arm around the shoulder, son. Slow it down. I'm like, what do you mean? You're screwing it up for the rest of us. And I honestly, I was so naive. I completely ignored it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. I got to make money. And it went from the arm around the shoulder to the big dude coming over. And, I get in a fight, literally. I tell this story in the book. I get in a fight, roll down this big flight of stairs in this factory, big group of people come around. The general manager takes me to his office. Kid, your dad worked here for like 30 years, never caused any trouble. You're here 2 weeks and you get in a fight. And I thought I was going to do him a favor. I'm like, man, you get all kinds of problems here. People don't want to work hard. They want to get paid more and work less, and people are lazy, and they want me to punch them out so that they can leave at 2 p.m. and I'll punch their clock at 5. You realize all the stuff that's going on here? And he goes, welcome to the world.
Yeah.
People don't want to work that hard, the average person. But here's the learning from that, because you can apply that to this generation and say, people don't work that hard. You know what it means? It means more opportunity for those who do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if my peers don't want to work hard, great, because I'm going to look twice as smart and twice as promotable if I'm out there busting it and they're whining about having to work too hard, right?
Yeah, that's the thing that I think that we don't talk about enough, right? And it was funny, as you were talking, I was pulling up a stat. This one was published in the New York Post, and it was a survey that was done by Resume Builder. They asked 1,300 managers, and 3 out of 4 agree that Gen Z is harder to work with than any other generation, so much so that 65% of employers say they have to fire them more often. And so I think there's kind of 2 things, right? One, you see this somewhat disturbing trend on social media platforms like TikTok of people who are trying to do as little as possible while taking as much as possible from the company as they can. Mm-hmm. And I think the second is a lot of these employees are saying, we want to be fulfilled at work. We want to be treated fairly at work, which I get that. But the problem there is that they don't do anything about it. You can't just show up to work and say, I want to be fulfilled, fulfill me, right? Your fulfillment comes from a lot of different places. It comes from how you manage your life. It comes from the relationships that you have in your personal life. It comes from how you show up to work every day and the commitments that you're willing to make and the mindset that you have. But I feel like a lot of people are just showing up to work and they're saying, you owe me. Right? Forget the fact that you're paying me a salary and benefits and you're paying for all the tools and resources that I'm using. You owe me to fulfill me. What are you going to do? And that to me is like a death mindset. That is such a bad way to think. And to your point, the people out there who are willing to work a little bit harder, and I reference Mark Randolph all the time on my show. He was the first CEO of Netflix. And he said one of his rules for success is always do 10% more than what is asked of you. And so it's crazy to me to think that, like, I get annoyed and almost angry to the point when I hear and see some of these stories. And it's tough. I mean, but there's also opportunity for the people who are willing to put in the time and the effort and the work.
That's exactly right. And that's what I hope people will take away from this conversation is that, there's 2 ways to look at it. One, you go, oh, wow, what a shame. It's terrible. Or you can say, wow, what an opportunity for me. Because to the extent I can change that, to the extent I can use that to my advantage, it's going to be better for me. In fact, as you were talking, I'm sitting there going, wow, you know what? That's great. Because if that many of this generation really think that way, what an audience for my book, because literally my book is like, the future's in your hands. I mean, it is all about
you should go on TikTok. There are these trending topics that blow my mind. There's and I went on there the other day just to see if this is BS or if it's real. There's a trending topic called lazy girl jobs, where and it's a huge trending topic, and there's several of these, right, where people are going up there and they're doing videos of themselves of how they could get jobs and do as little work as possible while still getting paid. And there's actually a video that I saw yesterday of a woman who put up a TikTok video saying, these are the questions that you should ask your employer to tell if they want you to work hard or not. And if they want you to work hard, you should get out of there. And I saw that video and I almost punched my laptop screen because this mentality and mindset, I think is very, very toxic for a lot of people out there, right? I think hard work should be rewarded. And the thing is, if you don't like where you are, then quit and go build something. That's what I did 15 years ago, right? I hated my job, but I didn't show up to work and just complain. I said, the hell with this. I'm going to figure out how to go build something on my own. Mm-hmm. And just having this mindset of I'm going to show up to work and complain and whine and whinge and not do anything about it and not propose any solutions, it's like, what are we doing? It's bonkers.
Yeah.
So I love the
Yeah.
message of the book of taking that accountability.
Well, I hope so. But this isn't new. This has been around forever. I just had a high school reunion, and I don't mean this. I say this very cautiously because I love my friends from my class, but there were a lot of kids that just didn't want to work.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't want to study. I want to hang out. I'm gonna, drink beer back in the day, and whatever. But I just don't want to put in the time. I don't want to put in the work. And they're still in that town, and they've got a fine life, but they don't have the freedom that I have. So it's not. I could say, well, I make so much more money. Not at all. But I have so much more freedom today for the hard work I put in then and all along the way. That to me, that's worth more than any amount of money because I can do anything I want to do. And they're kind of, many of them are trapped in what seemed like an easy job at the time. But today they might feel a little bit trapped, and they may not even know what they've missed, sadly, because they didn't get out and see the world.
I learned something absolutely insane today. 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed to it. Do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. It'll take you just 1 second and it helps the channel quite a bit. You'll also get access to new videos when they are released. Hit that subscribe button, and now let's get back to the content. And it's a lack of foresight, right? Because I think a lot of people who have that mentality, they think it might sound cool now. What's going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years? You want to buy a house, you want to have kids, you want to have a family. You're not going to get that on a job where you're showing up and you're trying to be lazy. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. That even goes to the question of college. I was just turned down for an interview on Fox, which was kind of interesting because they had reached out because of the book. And they said, hey, we'd like to interview CEOs and talk about how important college is to corporations, to big corporations. And I wrote a couple paragraphs and said, man, it is critically important. If we're going to compete on a global scale in the future, in the information age, we're going to desperately need more college educated, well-informed, capable employees, not less. And it didn't fit their narrative. And I didn't understand that. I was shocked. The article came out, and the article was all about, you don't need college. It's overrated. It costs too much money. Look at these great paying jobs. Like you can make $50 an hour as a plumber. And there's nothing wrong with vocations at all. But that $50 an hour job that really looks good today might be making $60 an hour in 20 years.
Yeah.
When inflation has gone through the roof. So it's a trap, I think, that many people fall into, thinking, I'll just take the easy path.
Yep. And I'm a big believer in how hard you work and how smart you work is in proportion to the success that you should be achieving. Frank Blake, he's the former CEO of the Home Depot. I had him on the podcast, and he said that one of the things that he realized as he was becoming a leader and growing in the ranks is that to be a leader, you always have to care more and do more. And I feel like that mindset and mentality is not sinking in for a lot of people. You can't do less and expect to grow farther in your career. Like if you have aspirations to make an impact and become a leader or an executive, you're going to have to work harder and smarter than a lot of your peers. I mean, if you don't have those aspirations, then that's fine. But for a lot of people, they do want that. And so I was curious, maybe we can transition to what you had to do. I mean, can you share stories of how you had to become CEO? What did you have to go through? What challenges did you have to overcome? How much were you working to get to the level that you were to be CEO of so many successful companies?
So to bridge to that, Jacob, I'm just going to add one last footnote to what you just described. Now, I think the challenge is so often we equate success with money.
Yeah.
Which is my salary. So I don't need to make a boatload of money. I love my simple life, blah, 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 blah. And that's the trap, because it's not about making money. And some people just give up. It's like, I'm never going to be a millionaire anyway. But it's not about making the money. It's about the more you learn and the more hard work you do, the more you can do. Even if it's just within, the ranks of McDonald's where I was flipping burgers. The harder I worked, the sooner I got promoted and I ended up being a shift manager. Well, that was a lot more fun than cleaning the grill, right?
Yep.
But I got that because I worked hard. And then I realized, wow, I can do more and more and more. To take that back to the story, I think the advantage, I had a secret weapon growing up. I went through hell. I mean, literally, I grew up in a house with no running water, a pump outside, a wood burning fireplace that would go out in the middle of the night in the winter in Massachusetts and half freeze you to death. The buckets, the galvanized buckets that we put water in would freeze over in the house. It was so cold sometimes during the winter. And literally that way of growing up. And then, add on to that, my mom leaving when I was 5 because she was that had enough with that lifestyle and broken family and a house being condemned and parents passing away. I ended up, in spite of all those challenges, with a fierce sense of independence and a recognition that, you know what? No one's going to do this for me.
Yeah.
If I don't do this myself, if I don't figure this out, I'm going to be trapped in this existence for the rest of my life, and I don't want to live like this either. So that was the impetus for me, and I kind of felt bad in many ways, and still do in some cases. Looking back at the kids that came from wealthy families, I mean, many of them do very, very well, but it was, I think, in many ways, a secret weapon that I had because I was used to dealing with adversity and setbacks and hard work and all that other stuff. And they didn't have to in many cases. They had it, in some cases, almost too easy,
Yeah, my dad always used to say, so my parents are immigrants. They came from the Republic of Georgia, the former USSR. And I was actually born in Australia. And growing up, my dad always used to say, metaphorically speaking, you have to live in the jungle for a bit. Basically saying that you have to go through hardships and challenges to know what it's like to work and to put in time and effort and to make sacrifices. And I feel like a lot of people haven't gone through those types of challenges, right? They haven't lived in a house with no running water. They haven't had to go through working 16, 17, 18 hours a day to make ends meet. They haven't had to learn a new language to be able to assimilate into a corporate culture. A lot of it has been, and not to say that they haven't gone through challenges, but the challenges, I think, pale in comparison to what they were before. Today, a lot of younger people, their challenge is my Wi-Fi doesn't go out. Starbucks ran out of my cup of coffee that I really love, my mocha, frappuccino, whatever latte. And I think we need to get back to this idea of encouraging challenges, encouraging tough times, encouraging working hard, encouraging sacrifice. Part of me, I also wanted to write an article because there's this big debate about getting back to work in the office and the fact that employees are outraged that they have to come back 2 to 3 days a week. And I wanted to write an article, which probably I will in the coming weeks, that basically says, I think for the next year, every employee should have to work in the office. Mm-hmm. Every day. A, to appreciate what a flexible work environment is, and B, because we've spent so much time disconnected from each other that I think it's very hard for leaders to get back together as far as the culture, the vision, the plan for the company, growth, coming up with ideas and solutions. It seems like we have these puzzle pieces and it's hard to put them together. And the only way to put them together is to bring all the pieces together for a while, get things sorted and then say, okay, let's enable flexible work. I'm sure people will be angry with that too, but I think it's important. So
I agree with you.
So the challenges that you went through, I mean, you go from that situation to becoming the CEO of 7-Eleven. What was your work ethic like? How much time were you putting in? Why did you become the CEO of 7-Eleven instead of one of your peers?
Well, at 7-Eleven, it was also one of those examples of the harder I worked, the more I took on that others didn't want to take on, the more opportunity I would get. And I entered the business, ironically, via the gasoline department. My first job out of graduate school was with Gulf Oil, major oil company, doing M&A work. But one of the people I was working with ended up at Citgo Petroleum, which was a division of the Southland Corporation, the parent company for 7-Eleven, and asked me to come along to help with a turnaround. They had done an acquisition of an oil company, and this is a retail company, didn't really know how to run it. So I entered the company via that avenue on the planning side. So first, developed a plan for the transformation and then ultimate sale of the petroleum business. Was asked then to stay with 7-Eleven to run the retail gasoline business. Now, keep in mind, I'm still a kid at that point. I knew nothing about retailing, running an operation, nothing. I was fresh out of grad school, working in the CFO's office of a major oil company, doing M&A, crunching numbers on my brandy new Apple computer that had just come out, right, which made me look like a rock star. But to your point, I was working like a dog, and I was used to working like a dog because I had to in high school to get to college. I had to in college to just survive, and then to get into grad school. And then I worked like crazy in grad school. So when I got into the workforce, it was, working 17, 18-hour days was no big deal. Saturdays, yeah, of course I'm going to work on Saturdays. I did throughout school. So it was just the continuity of that. And it really gave me an edge versus so many other people. One last little piece of the story. The chairman of the company, who became my mentor at 7-Eleven, would show up on Saturdays, and he'd work every Saturday. He was chairman of the company. He was the son of the founder of the company 70 years before, right? But he'd work on Saturdays, and he'd look around the parking lot, and he'd see whose car was there. And I'd get a call from him, and his name was John Thompson. He'd say, "Hey, Jim, let's go down to Fousey's," which was a little bar, not far from the office. "Let's have lunch." And he'd take 4 or 5 of us to lunch because we came in on a Saturday. What a great lesson that was for me. And it turned out to be a mentorship opportunity because I'm with the chairman of the company, hearing his thoughts, and he's picking my brain about little things that are going on within the ranks of the company. Great opportunity.
What do you say to people who say, "Oh, that's crazy, 17, 18 hours a day"? And I mean, I get it. I mean, right, for a lot of people, that's a lot. But then I think you need to temper your expectations with what you hope to achieve, right? If you want to become the CEO of a company, if you want to become a senior executive at a company, then you have to, like if you look at any great athlete, you look at LeBron James or Serena Williams or Michael Jordan, you can't look at any of those athletes and say they got to where they are because they were putting in 32 to 40 hours a week, right? I mean, they were Kobe Bryant, right? They were notorious for being the first ones there. They were notorious for being the last ones to leave. They put in probably more time, more work than anybody else. Now, is everybody going to be a Kobe Bryant or a Serena Williams? No. But if that's what you aspire to, then you need to go into that knowing that's what it takes.
Yeah.
And and I feel like talking about that today, "Oh no, you're crazy. Why you should be able to do that on 32 hours a week." And people are just so confused with what it takes to get to that level.
But here's the secret, I think. I think there's a secret to this. I use Tom Brady as an example in my book. He never worked a day in his life.
Yeah.
But man, after a long, grueling game, he'd be back in the locker room watching videos from the game until 10 o'clock at night after getting the heck beat out of him during the game, right? But was that really him at work until 10 p.m.? No, to him it was fun. It was a game, right? He was playing, and it's no different than a kid studying, and it's just hates studying, but takes that same device that they were working, doing their homework on, and they'll play video games for like 10 hours, right?
Yeah.
That's not work. So here's the secret. If you're doing something that you find is fun, or if you find a way to make your work fun, and in the book I talk about, creativity, and it's intelligence having fun. So if you can apply creativity to your work and make it fun, then it's not work. And 18-hour days are like, "Oh, gee, I wish I could have worked 20. As crazy as that sounds, it really does work.
Well, we talked about some of the accountability on behalf of employees. And yeah, I think people are pretty clear where I stand around the importance of hard work and being able to make sacrifices and doing stuff like that. Where do organizations stand? Because one of the big things that I hear from a lot of people is that, you know what, organizations took advantage of employees for many, many years, and now finally the balance of power has shifted. It's time for employees to take advantage of the organization, which I don't entirely subscribe to that belief. But obviously, organizations need to do something, right, to make sure that employees feel valued and cared for, that they invest in the experience, that they give learning and growth and development opportunities. So, what role did you play as the leader at a company like 7-Eleven and Blockbuster to make sure that you were giving to the employees too? And any examples of what that might look like for a company or for a leader?
Yeah, and it's going to sound a little harsh. I have to just straight up. But, employees are like living, breathing, not employees, organizations are like living, breathing things. They take on the identity, the culture, the character of the collection of individuals that make up that organization, right? Um, I met with one of Jack Welch's people, a guy named Ram Charan. He's a big guru on business. He was Jack's mentor. And Jack Welch was harsh. He was like, 10% of the company every year, you're gone. You're
Yeah.
out of here. And I'm doing you a favor, by the way, because you weren't going to cut it anyway. You're going to end up in middle management and stuck. You'd be a miserable life. You go and beat your dog. And I'm going to give you a big break because I'm going to fire you and force you to go find something you're better at. I mean, that's the extreme harsh. So I'm meeting with his guy, Ram Charan, right? And when I first got to 7-Eleven, not first got to, but first became CEO of 7-Eleven, and I thought I needed a coach. And he sat me down. He made me write take my little organization, my executive team. He made me describe every member of the team. And I did. And he said, you're going to fail. I was like, dude, how do you know I'm going to fail? I've only been talking to you for like 30 minutes. And he said, you've got the wrong people in the wrong seats, and you don't have the guts to cut them loose and replace them with people that are the right people in that organization to move that living, breathing organization, that being that's a reflection of the character of the individuals. It will fail because you have the wrong mix of individuals in. And the bad apples will drag that living, breathing organization down.
What did you write down on there? Obviously, you don't have to give names, but what did you write down on there that he looked at and said you're going to fail? Was it just like skills and weaknesses of all of the people? Okay.
Yeah, here's a financial person that they're not a CPA, but they're a good guy, and the people love him in the department. But he's not really very very ruthless. When it comes to managing a budget and holding people accountable. And it was that kind of thing. And it was like, that job you need somebody that's got some teeth, and not the one everyone likes necessarily.
What's part of what I think we don't talk about enough anymore is the relationship between the employee and the employer. Because if you go back to basics, it's basically the company saying, hey, we need help with something. And the employee saying, hey, I'm good at that. I can do that. And then you say, great, we'll pay you to do that. And the employee says, great, I'll do that. And that's kind of at the core of what the relationship is, right? But if you keep demonstrating that you can't do something, or that you don't want to do something, or that you don't want to be there, or that you don't care, why does that company have a responsibility to keep you there? Now, the flip side of that is also true. If the company is not treating you well, and leaders are taking credit for your work, and you're being demeaned, and you're being forced to do 18 hours a day, even though you signed up for 9, you also have a right to quit. But I think we need to get back to understanding like what that relationship is for. The employee makes a commitment, the employer makes a commitment, and there are both parties here that need to play a role in making sure that the relationship is balanced out.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and what it comes down to, I think, is the ability for leadership to make people all at every level of the organization understand that they're part of the team and what their role is in that team. Walmart is not a unionized organization, right? And you look at a big retailer like that, you say, how in the world did they make it all these years without a labor union?
Yeah.
Well, the people at Walmart feel like they're stakeholders. And some of this goes right back to Sam Walton. I actually took a page out of Sam's book
Hmm.
because a lot of this, so much of this, Jacob, is communication. Another chapter in my book. So much of it is communication because Sam Walton recognized the bigger we get, the more layers of management between me and the person on the sales floor. And if they don't understand what's really important to me, they'll never execute the culture and the principles of the company that I want that customer to see. So every week he would fly all of his leaders from the field into Bentonville, created a small air force because that's the only way they could get there. Literally, had all these little planes flying from all over the country, and they would all come in on Saturday. I mean, talk about work ethic, right? They gave up their Saturday and sometimes Sunday to fly back home just to be there. But he would speak to every one of the key employees of the company and make sure they all understood the priorities that week. The result of that is they all felt like they were stakeholders. This is our company. I heard it directly from Sam. And so you say, well, why doesn't Walmart have a labor union? Well, a labor union comes from the people not feeling like they have stakeholders or a share in the voice of management. They feel like they have to force management to treat them properly. So
Hmm.
I do think it's really very much about communication
Yeah.
and engaging your entire team, all the way to the person who sweeps the floors, as stakeholders in the success of that enterprise.
If you enjoy getting leadership and career advice and trying to figure out how to future-proof your organization, you are not going to want to miss heading over and subscribing to my Substack, which you can do by going to greatleadership.substack.com. We have a community there of tens of thousands of people from around the world, and it's where I share my latest thinking, my best ideas, exclusive interviews with CEOs, in-depth articles and insights that I share, and leadership hacks from some of the world's top leaders and best-selling authors. So if you want to really step up your leadership game, excel in your career, head over to greatleadership.substack.com. You are not going to want to miss this opportunity. Yeah, I feel like we need to encourage more builders, whether you're building for yourself and you're an entrepreneur or you're inside of a company. But I think everybody needs to have that builder mindset. If you're not building, then what are you doing? Right? I mean, maintaining, I feel like, is the bare minimum, but you want to build and create. And I think that's a message I hope more people take away. I want to transition to one thing before we jump into these 9 learnings from the CEO. And that is the Blockbuster story. And I have to ask you about this because I can't tell you how many case studies and how many stories I've seen. It's talked about everywhere in books. Blockbuster failed because they were not able to adapt to technology.
Yeah.
And, you know, the stories of how Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph went to Blockbuster, they tried to pitch it and they were laughed out of the room. And then Blockbuster tried to copy it. And because they weren't tech savvy, they failed. And that's kind of the story that's always been told. And so kind of a two-part question there is, why did Blockbuster actually fail? And the second part of that question is, as a CEO, how, and this is even if you're not a CEO, as a leader, if you go through failure, how do you deal with it? Because I remember, I think it was Jim Cramer, right? He did like an article about you or something like that, right? The CEO of shame and stuff like that. So how do you deal with that? Because obviously a lot of people make mistakes, and I've interviewed a lot of CEOs on this show who've gone through colossal failures and what they had to do to rebuild. So A, how did Starbucks fail? And B, how did you then deal with the failure and move on and get through it?
Sure. Jim Cramer, by the way, was my greatest fan at 7-Eleven. He was awesome. He was like, oh, this guy's a genius. He's increased shareholder value 10 times and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then you got the Blockbuster. He literally threw a box of popcorn at my picture on the wall on Mad Money.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of that's performative and, you know,
Oh,
for the
yeah, yeah,
ratings.
yeah. Oh, jeez.
Do you still talk to
Anyway,
him?
yeah, I haven't seen him in a while, but yeah, we would laugh about it, when I come across him again. Maybe he'll interview me for my book. I don't know. But there are two. I'll go to B first because it's easier. Because the two learnings, really important learnings for any CEO or any leader, is A, it's not personal. I mean, Jim Cramer's deal wasn't the worst. I showed up at a half-page picture in the New York Post, full color, with a Pinocchio nose. And
Holy.
it's like, really, because they thought I lied about not planning to file. I had no intention of filing bankruptcy. We had plenty of cash flow, but it didn't stop them from doing that. I saw it. I laughed at it. I still use it when I go and do speeches, particularly in schools, and tell kids it's not personal.
Yeah.
They're making money. I was trying to make money, and they made fun of me. Get over it. They're not. It's not going to scar you unless you let it. And then the second thing I use is Nelson Mandela's quote, which I love. I never lose, he said. I win or I learn. It's so true. I learned a ton at Blockbuster. Never lost. Would I do a few things differently? Yeah. But I learned a ton. And now you're ready for the Blockbuster piece of the story?
Yes. This is the big myth, right? That a lot of people keep saying on Blockbuster. So what's the real reason the Blockbuster went down? What happened there?
All right. So I have to take you all the way back to I was trying to, after 7-Eleven, after a wild period of success, seeing how technology can transform a company, because that was the true success of 7-Eleven. We pulled it out of bankruptcy in 1991, brought in technology, literally transformed every item by item in the store to make it successful, make it more convenient. And I took that learning and said, what other company is out there that needs help? And I looked at Blockbuster and I said, my gosh, they're not moving quickly enough into the transformation to digital. They saw it coming, and they had already started a DVD by mail like Netflix business, but they weren't really going down the digital path yet. They were doing still DVDs by mail, trying to build a subscription business. So I saw that as very short term. I saw the long term being streaming, and particularly streaming new releases. So the very first action I took, well, first of all, I wanted to take the company private. Carl Icahn was one of the board members. Carl talked me into leaving it public. Mistake number one. Had we taken it private in 2007 when I joined the company, you remember what happened in 2008? Lehman Brothers collapsed, banks shut down. We would have refinanced $1 billion of debt at about 5.5% interest.
Yeah.
As opposed to a third of it coming due in 2009 and having to try to refinance it at 12 to 13%, if that was even possible. So keep that in the back of your mind as we go through the story. But the very first thing I did, so I wish I had taken it private, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Carl talked me into leaving it a public company. We did. No worries. I've run public companies. I'm not afraid of it. I can do this. First thing we did is to buy a company called MovieLink.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of MovieLink?
Only because I did research on you and Blockbuster, but before that,
Awesome. No. MovieLink was the creation of 5 major studios: Sony, Paramount, MGM, Warner Brothers. They put this the first streaming video company that was streaming new releases. They were the first to put that in the market. Now, these were arch enemies. Studios hell hated each other. They didn't work well together, but they wanted to prevent what happened with DVDs and VHS and all these people getting into rentals. So the studios rightfully so, wanted to control their intellectual property and their digital content. So they created a company. Well, it wasn't doing very well. The technology was there, but it was early. People weren't really streaming yet. Buffering was there. The internet wasn't robust.
Yep.
So they sold it to Blockbuster. Why Blockbuster and not Netflix? Because Blockbuster was their preferred model. Netflix is the all-you-can-eat buffet. So when you sell steak, Wagyu beef, you don't want it to go in the all-you-can-eat buffet line for 19.99, right?
Yeah.
You want to sell it a la carte for $70 on a plate. And that's the way the studios looked at streaming video. They wanted Blockbuster as their customer. So we bought this company. At the same time, we recognized that the stores were critical because we didn't know if we were 1, 2, 5 years away from streaming. It required, for very effective streaming, at least 4G capability
Yep.
on the internet, and even higher for a good experience. And we didn't know how long that was going to take, or for people to adopt the devices. Putting this into context, the iPhone came out in '07, and the iPad didn't come out until '09. So people weren't even thinking about watching movies on portable devices.
Yeah.
So we were well positioned, but we had to fix the stores too because we needed cash flow from the stores. We were able to fix the stores. We doubled EBITDA in '08. So we ended up with like $180 million in EBITDA and cash flow for the year 2008. We were high-fiving. The board was high-fiving. Wall Street was applauding. And I had been pushing the rating agencies for an increase in my debt rating, improvement in my debt rating, so I could refinance that $1 billion, knowing I had a third of it due in '09. Moody's gave us a 2-notch upgrade in our debt rating in the third quarter of '09. I still have the press release out there where they said, based on excellent operating results and a bright future, Blockbuster, blah, 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 we give them a 2-notch upgrade. But because Lehman had just collapsed, they said they may not be able to refinance their debt due in '09. Therefore, they're a liquidity risk. They have a chance of default. That began the spiral. So when the street says, oh my gosh, this company may default on its debt, then panic sets in. The debt gets crushed. People are dumping it, selling it cheap. The equity gets crushed. Vendors get nervous. And ultimately, that's what caused the demise of Blockbuster. We pulled back, tried everything. We refinanced the debt at a higher interest rate. By some miracle, got it done when the banks were virtually shut. But the ultimate crushing blow is that the studios said, we don't want to be the last man standing, and pulled our credit terms. So we went from 90 days to cash terms. One thing that killed Blockbuster. It took $300 million in cash in 1 week out of the system when the studios basically said, we're going to put you on cash terms. And that was the end. Not the end. It caused us to have to file.
Yeah. So wait,
one more.
So it started as a rumor.
It started as a rumor. Now there's lots of speculation about how the rumor got planted because we had actually hired counsel to protect us from ever having the need to file bankruptcy.
Okay.
And rumor of that hiring got to the street.
Oh.
Now, how that got to the street, I don't know. There's lots of speculation. Who knows how?
People
or why,
started saying, "Oh, Blockbuster hired this company. They're going in debt. They're going to have problems." And then the people who were involved with the studios were kind of like, "Okay,
exactly."
Ah.
But here's what's going on behind the scenes that nobody knows. The story nobody knows. Meanwhile, we knew we had to have a strategic partner.
Yeah.
So I had a deal inked by my board with Google and on the desk of their board members. And if you think about the opportunity there, YouTube, anything free. Blockbuster, any trailer, any movie content that was for pay would all come under the Blockbuster icon and then allow people to see their movies. We were going to be Google's preferred partner. So any search for any movie, boom, would have had Blockbuster come up first. It was a deal made in heaven. And it was literally before their board. They wanted to do it. They were ready to sign the deal. And the rumor came out, and the day it popped into the New York Times, Blockbuster may file. I had a call from Nikesh Arora, who was number 2 or 3 guy at Google at the time. And Nikesh said, Jim, I'm so sorry. Because of this, we can't do the deal. We have to wait until you guys get through your financial issues.
Wow. So you guys had a deal
Yeah,
almost done to be Google's partner, which would have probably saved and fixed everything.
absolutely. It would have gone a long way, long way.
So it seems like the big
Yeah.
problem was that you guys owed money, and instead of being able to pay it off over time, they basically came to you and said, okay, we need it now because there's rumor that you're going bankrupt. Give us our cash.
Well, no, it's a little different. It would be, I guess I'd compare it to having a mortgage today. Let's say you mortgage your house and you put, a $200,000 mortgage on your house, but let's call it a variable rate mortgage. And you don't think about it when you sign it. Okay, interest rates are 2%. And all of a sudden you wake up and it's due next month and interest rates went up to 8%. Now you go, wait, I didn't get a raise during that period. I mean, my income is the same, and now
Yeah.
my payment went from $500 a month to $800 a month. How am I going to cover that? That's more or less what happened with a third. So 300 million of debt had to get refinanced in 2009.
Wow. And so,
Yeah.
the rate went up considerably, it seems like.
Yeah, we literally went from like 5% to 12.
Wow. So
Yeah.
was that because of just kind of the contract that was signed earlier? Like some people might say, well, why didn't you just sign a 30-year fix instead of a variable?
No, and I'm oversimplifying it, but it was basically Blockbuster had $1 billion of debt when they spun out as a public company from Viacom 10 years earlier. It was a natural progression that it would come due in 2009. That's why, remember I said the first thing I wanted to do was take it private.
Yeah.
I would have refinanced 100% of that at 6% in 2007. Never would have batted an eyelash with the financial collapse because we were fine from a cash flow perspective.
So it wasn't so much the technology. Were you guys thinking about the technology? I mean, obviously you guys were aware of Netflix. You knew what they were doing. So the technology was on the radar. You guys were building something, right? I mean, you had what was it called? Blockbuster Online?
Movie Link. We bought the first streaming video company built by the studios and then converted it we called it Blockbuster On Demand.
On demand, yeah.
Yeah. And that was the plan. We also, and I could go on and on about the story, but we also had a deal potentially for virtually 60% of all content to do its streaming, and the deal would have been exclusive to Blockbuster. This literally would have left Netflix doing DVDs by mail still today because they would have had at the time nothing to stream.
Yeah, I think Mark Randolph, there was an interview that he did, and he basically said Blockbuster could have easily killed Netflix, but it was the debt that ultimately killed Blockbuster. And so he acknowledged that too. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so many people think it was a technology issue, but a lot of people forget that it was the financial crisis, that there were so many things. But I guess the technology makes it a more compelling and better story, right?
It's an easy story. It's like it's like our earlier conversation. Instead of doing the work to understand the real story, let's go to the easy answer.
Yeah.
Oh, must be a technology thing. They didn't keep up with technology. And I'll write an article like this for Wired magazine, and it'll take 20 minutes instead of 3 hours to do the research and find out what really happened.
Yeah. Huh, fascinating.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to switch over now to probably one of the most important sections of the book, which is the C-suite learnings. And C-suite learnings, I thought, is very compelling. There was 9 of them in there, right? Broken down into what to learn, how to learn, and why we learn. So can you walk us through that? Because I think it's going to be really important for people who are either in leadership roles and they want to, keep moving, or for people who want to get into their first leadership roles to already start thinking about, having that C-suite, having that executive mentality. So what exactly are these 9 learnings? My conversation with Jim continues, where we talk about the 9 C-suite learnings. So as you could probably tell, this podcast ran a little bit longer than usual because Jim had so many amazing stories and insights, which is why you're not going to want to miss the next 15, 20 minutes or so of this conversation, because Jim is going to go through what he calls a roadmap. 9 things that he learned during the course of his career, which he says if he would have known these earlier, it would have totally transformed his life. He figured this out after being a CEO at so many companies and working in the corporate world. So if you want to know what these 9 C-suite learnings are, this roadmap that he breaks down into 3 categories of what to learn, how to learn, and why to learn, then you are going to want to make sure that you head over to Substack, greatleadership.substack.com, and subscribe over there. And thanks again for tuning in. If you get a couple seconds, please share this podcast with your friends, family members, anybody who you think can learn something from this episode. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll see you next time.